Good afternoon, everyone. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. And we have a very fascinating show today. Talk about specialization and talk about expertise. We've combined them both today with Miss Susan Fall, who is the president and founder of LaunchIt PR. And when LaunchIt PR came across my desk, I was very interested because they're a very, very innovative PR firm that brings together expertise and deep transportation knowledge in the PR field. In other words, they specialize in PR for freight technology companies. And when I heard Susan was specializing in this one very interesting niche, I had to get her on the show. So Susan, welcome to the show today.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to talk about trucking, my favorite subject.
Now, Susan, I know you're a little modest, but you're really what's called the technology and PR superstar in the trucking field. Everybody in the trucking field knows you. So let's talk about it a little bit. LaunchIt PR. Let's pull the lens back because I like to do that at the start of the show, and tell us just a little bit about LaunchIt PR.
Well, first I'll probably tell you how it all came to be. Would you like to hear how that happened? Because it's kind of interesting. How do you choose trucking and technology? But I, after college, moved back to San Diego, where I'm from. And this little company called Qualcomm was getting started, getting pretty big. And I got a job in there doing PR in their OmniTrax division, which was their very first product. We were testing CDMA technology, which is what we now use in our phones. We were testing it on trucks. And my job was to explain what GPS meant to all the truck drivers, trucking industry, the executives. So I didn't even know what GPS was. I mean, this is 1993, kind of just hearing about GPS. And then you learned, okay, and the trucking industry and what is the role that played. And as you can imagine, it played a massive role then, but we had things to fight. We had Big Brother to fight. I mean, that was a big deal. Now a truck driver is being tracked, but at the same time, he's able to communicate. They're able to be more efficient. So I spent 7 years with Qualcomm, OmniTrax, doing everything PR related, from media to industry relations, and really learned in that time. A lot happened. I mean, this is 93 to 2000, and we had a lot of GPS companies coming in, people thinking that they can, just because they have a GPS company, they can get into trucking. Trucking is very unique. The commercial trucking industry is unique, and the logistics part is unique. So fast forward, I started LaunchIt in 2000 with the intention of helping all of these companies understand, A, do they even work in the market? Is their product right for this market? B, do they know the people? I mean, trucking is, a lot of industries I know are very relationship oriented, but I think trucking is especially so. It's a handshake is a handshake. I need to know you. I don't social media. I mean, I'll listen to it. I'll look at it, but I don't live for it. And so we now represent everything from, so very, like you said, very specialized in the trucking and logistics field, especially the technology players in that field. So it's everything from products that help truck drivers to help trucks be more efficient, to help the back office be more efficient.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, Susan, because that's so important in today's age, for these technology companies to have trucking companies get to know them and what they can offer, especially now since everything's being delivered. So I would imagine that in the past 5 or 10 years, you've seen an amazing increase of the number of technology companies coming to the forefront to help truckers and trucking companies do their thing. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's been and also a lot of venture capital money. I mean, we were kind of this unknown, even though trucking, I think everyone, or should, if they don't realize, this country would shut down in a matter of days if trucking went away. And I don't think a lot of people realize, like, everything you see at some point was touched a truck. And I think we're starting to realize that more now with e-commerce, and we're understanding that more. We understood it, frankly, during this last year when shelves were empty. I mean, that was a supply chain issue, but it was also just a logistics, getting product to shelves. We haven't realized that in this country. So I think the last five years, especially 10 years, we started to see much more of an increase in the number of tech players. A lot of them make it, a lot of them don't. I mean, it's a tough industry. It's very, very complex. It's not as simple as people think.
Well, logistics is a very complex idea, and the companies that can make their logistics happen in a seamless way are the ones that are going to win. And hopefully they're using the technology platforms that LaunchIt is able to help promote, if you will, for the trucking companies to get from point A to B in a very, very fast way. Now, Susan, I get up early in the morning. I drive to a warehouse in another business that I'm an investor in on occasion. And it's amazing to me how many trucks are on the road at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. And I always wonder to myself, how do they get to where they're going? Do these trucks now have, what type of technology are in the trucks so that they know exactly where they need to go, how they need to get there, and what time they need to deliver it?
So it's a combo. You know, it just as back in the day, it was hardwired in, and you had onboard computers, and we still have those to this day. But the number of apps and phone applications now are also used quite often. But I mean, there is everything in these trucks, not only, again, to help the driver to make their life comfortable. I mean, just think about things like satellite TV at all. And we started, one of our clients we introduced about a decade ago to help drivers be able to just enjoy and watch TV. That's a basic. Fuel efficiency products, how they can drive better. But really there's everything from truck parking apps. I mean, that's something you don't think about, how these guys have to park, and they have to park overnight to sleep. And if there is no parking and they're out of hours of service, because you can only drive so many hours a day. So there are many, many products to help with the logistics of all of that.
You see, this is very fascinating because we've had a number of public relations firms on the show because it's such an important component of a major brand or companies that are trying to get to the forefront of their space. But this is really interesting to me because you specialize. And there's this old saying that specialists win and generalists lose. So if somebody comes to you that's outside of the transportation field, do you take them on, or do you still specialize in just the transportation field that you become sort of the queen of in terms of PR?
When I first started, I had a health food chain, a school, and I realized that I was much more efficient, much more effective in staying in my lane. So I highly recommend, if anyone's getting into the field of PR, and it's tough. I think I was fortunate. I thank Qualcomm for my training, so to speak, and I think if I had just gone out on my own and hoped to achieve that, it would have been hard right in the beginning. So I would absolutely recommend being you, and there will be times that it is rough and you're hurting for money and things aren't working right, and it's easy to want to take on someone else that's out of the space if they come to you, but don't do it. I mean, that would be stay in your lane, become an expert at what you do. I mean, I'm fortunate too. I also belong to an association, a group of other boutique PR agencies around the world that they all specialize in other areas. So if I have a client that wants to go more vertical, I can bring in one of my colleagues in PRBI to work with me on that. So that affords us to be able to, pull in a client that has trucking, but then also may want to go into consumer automotive, which is not my lane. Well,
that makes all the sense in the world. And for the younger entrepreneurs watching the show, listening to Susan talk about LaunchIt PR and how she's been able to build this very unique PR firm specializing in transportation technology. It's a great reminder to stay in your lane. You're not great at everything. You're great at something. And once you find what you're great at, stick with it, stay with it, and press the issue. So that's wonderful. Susan, in your business at LaunchIt PR, do you not only know the media contacts to get the great, sort of PR for your clients, but do you also know the trucking company sort of decision makers as well? And that's how you make the connection between the technology companies reaching out to you at LaunchIt and then the transportation companies themselves?
Yes and no. I never want to profess that I will help a client with sales, because a lot of times, that's a whole other lane. I mean, it's another lane. Media, absolutely. I have known, once you're in trucking, you don't leave it. You got to look now. I've been in it almost 30 years. And there are some reporters and editors I've worked with that entire time. You don't leave. And from the trucking company owner standpoint, those that are very involved in the industry, like through association involvement, through committees, because I'm very involved, I'll get to know those trucking company owners. And I get to know them again through going to conferences and serving on these committees. Some of them are really top customers of my clients, so I've interviewed them and done things for press. But I'm not the one to go out and say, hey, this client, you go meet this trucking company and sell to them. That's, again, not my lane, and I don't profess to be that.
Yeah, I love that. Stay in the lane, stay in the lane. And it's very interesting, again, because people not in the trucking industry, a lot of us take things for granted. We go on our application, we go to Amazon or one of the other marketplaces, we order something, and the next day it's there, and we open up our door and there's the package. And we're not thinking about all the logistics and all the trucking and transportation that has to go on behind it. So this is a very, very fascinating field in today's world, especially as technology continues to speed up and technology continues to improve. The expectation of the consumer is going to be that they're going to want more speed. Thus, the reason why these technology companies in the transportation field reach out to you at LaunchIt and they say, hey, we've got this technology that's going to increase speed, lessen the friction of the experience. And that's why your expertise comes in so handy to get the word out to these specialized sort of writers and newspapers and magazines that write about trucking. Is that sort of the way that it works right now?
It is. And, it's been surprisingly, we have a lot of trade pubs within our industry, because again, you have the trucking side, but you have the logistics side, you have the shippers. Your package, you have to think that package was probably it was touched a good dozen times before it got to your door. If you really want to look, especially if it came from overseas, especially if it came from China, it's drayaged onto a ship, onto a container, which then that container arrives in Long Beach. It is drayaged, a short haul off of that. Then it is maybe put on to a long haul truck that takes it over to Florida. If you really think, and then it's put into a smaller vehicle to get it to a distribution center. And then from there, it's out to your home. A lot of things touched. So yes, there are a lot of tech companies, and that part of the chain is improving quite a bit. Those are where we're seeing a lot more tech companies coming in. I think from the hardware side, so making our trucks more fuel efficient, more driver friendly. There's cameras in them now. We have products that are testing getting rid of side view and rear view mirrors altogether and using cameras. Truck drivers were texting well before you and I. They were the ones that were texting across country, in a sense, over an OmniTrax unit. So the trucks themselves, I think, have been very technologically advanced. It's that logistics chain that involves the shipper, the consignee, the warehouse. That's the part that the chain has been broken. So, good technology makes that that chain completely linked together. And yes, they come to me not only to get word out, but we're seeing more coming to launch it to help in an early phase. Like, what way should we take this product? Where do you see a need? So start to serve in a little more of an advisory role, which is fun. I like it. Makes me feel old. And that means I'm that old that I now could start to advise, but hey, I'll take it.
Oh, that's great. Well, people reach out to you for all kinds of reasons. So if somebody comes to launch it and they have a technology that's going to improve, let's say, the shipment of a container, that's different than trucking. Is that still part of what LaunchIt does in terms of, technology innovations for transportation?
Sure, it is, because it's part of that logistics part. Again, staying in my lane, I don't know about manufacturing or warehousing, so I really wouldn't help with that part of the supply chain, but it's the movement of goods that is where my expertise and my team's expertise comes into play. We have a client that tracks containers. So yes, we understand that part of the supply chain.
I love it. Now you mentioned that your expertise is in the technology innovations for transportation, obviously. So people watching the show, immediately they're going to be saying to themselves, well, she mentioned that they're going to be using maybe cameras instead of rear view mirrors or side mirrors. And you mentioned that the truckers were doing texting before everybody else. It seems like the truckers are really leading many technological advancements that actually filter down to the general public eventually. So what are some of the other things that you're seeing that the truckers are going to bring into their world that we're going to be excited about seeing as a regular person who's not a trucker down the road?
Well, certainly, and we've already seen this in the consumer end, but electrification, we will see more of that, and autonomous. You will see the driverless end. Now, that is a very interesting area. Everything from, regulatory, you have to think trucking, not only is it an incredibly difficult job, but they're also very regulated. Sometimes excessively so. And so the autonomous world it will be very interesting one to watch. I think a lot of people talk about driverless is going, we're going to see driverless in 2 years. That's not going to happen, but it will be an interesting field to watch. I think definitely the cameras are absolutely, we're already seeing it again in our vehicles, backup cameras. Trucks had those first. And I know there's going to be a lot of people, it's funny because a lot of people think that trucking, we're slow moving and we're behind. Again, we are absolutely in that logistics chain, but that's where all other parties and players have come in. I think I will always say that trucking, the trucks themselves have been very advanced. If you were to go into one right now, it is like an airplane. It is a pretty high-tech looking vehicle. I think the people don't realize to be a truck driver now. I have a soft spot for truck drivers because I think that they are a very underappreciated job, profession. And if we don't get more people to do it, we're going to be in again, a world of hurt. We are very hurting for truck drivers. So that's going to be an interesting challenge ahead of our industry.
So that's kind of this strange dichotomy, a tough dichotomy, because on the one hand, we're hearing that it's going to go autonomous, but on the other hand, we need truck drivers right now. So, it's hard to figure out where that inflection point is with regard to someone wanting to become a truck driver and what type of commitment they're going to make, knowing that ultimately some of the trucking and perhaps all the trucking down the road will become autonomous. But like you said, it's not going to happen in the next couple of years.
Oh, no, it's not going to happen. Where a truck driver is completely out of the picture is not, in my opinion, and it'll be interesting how people take this. We're not going to see that for a couple of decades. There is so much, that a human has to think about that a computer just can't. And even, yes, maybe some straight highway driving, absolutely. But there will always, maybe we'll be called a truck driver, and we've thrown everything from truck pilot, and you're hearing a lot of different, but it will be, it's a profession. You still have that customer service aspect you need. The truck driver is the interface a lot of times with your product, the shipper and the receiver. So there is a lot to it. I think it is a very entrepreneurial, which people wouldn't think that profession. You can be an owner operator. So basically you own the truck. You can decide what loads you want to take, what loads you don't want to take. And if you're very good at what you do, you will make very good money. If you don't use some of the technology in play and you take a load that you think is profitable, but once you really calculate it out, the miles and the hours and it wasn't that profitable. So if anyone, I think pulling the autonomous thing in only makes it easier. They're safer. Look at, again, our cars. We now have the auto warning, the brake warning systems, the lane departure systems. Trucks have that too. So it is a much easier vehicle to drive than it was 20 years ago, because I can remember getting behind the wheel of one on a test course, of course. And I literally had to stand up and put all my weight into the clutch to be able to shift that vehicle. That no longer is happening. I mean, we have women drivers now, quite a few. It could be a very good, especially for someone who wants to see the country, who doesn't mind being away from home. I
like it, and truck drivers are needed because everything today is trucked. I mean, you can go online and you can order something that weighs 30 tons. You can order a tractor trailer online, or you can order a car online, and all of those items need to get to its destination, and they're not going to helicopter them in. Is that right?
Yep. I mean, you are so right about that. And again, it's the number of touches. People don't think, so the car used to just go to the car dealership, or the refrigerator to the furniture store or appliance store. Now there's one more touch involved where it's coming to your house. And so we call it the final mile, last mile. That is the untapped industry that is really picking up. That last mile, and how do you make that efficient? Because I promise you right now, when you order your $2 coffee mug on Amazon, and you are getting it delivered overnight for free, they're losing money. I mean, that is in the delivery of that alone. You have to calculate that in, and so they have that mass capability. But anyone and everyone else, it's very difficult to truly figure out how to do it efficiently and profitably.
Susan, I want to get into actually, the public relations part of LaunchIt, but this is so fascinating. You brought up something called the final mile. Let's talk about that just for a minute. The way that I understand it from a professional looking at it from another sort of viewpoint is that final mile to get that delivery, that final mile to your home may be the most expensive mile of the entire journey. So in other words, I've been told by experts in Silicon Valley, for example, that Amazon wants to put places all around the country where you actually go to pick up your items, because that final mile of delivery is the most expensive mile to get that item to you. So instead, they might give you an incentive to come to that location so they don't have to deliver at that final mile. Is that your understanding of how it's all working right now?
Yes and no. I find it ironic. If anyone goes to malls, which again has been an interesting year, but I have gone by one, and there's an Amazon in a very big mall here in San Diego. There's an Amazon bookstore. Okay, I find that very funny, because when you really think about how it all started, and now now they're doing brick and mortar of a store. So you are hearing, I have not heard of there being an incentive to come, and maybe that would be something. We have the Amazon lockers in places. What you will see is something like a mall that is hurting right now, and probably not even to do with the pandemic, but even before that, we're liking to just shop from home. Those spaces are going to probably become more distribution centers. You're going to see more distribution centers. So then you're not having to, you can just do that final mile. You're not having to go distribution onto an LTL, a mid-sized vehicle, and then somewhere else onto that final mile. So they're removing that middle piece. But I would think that would be an interesting business model to look at. And certainly right now you can probably get commercial real estate for, a dime on the dollar. So that could very well see something that you start to see happen, which then just makes it right back to a mall again. The only difference is what you want and you're just going to go pick it up. So it'll depend upon the consumer on that one.
Very interesting. Let's talk about LaunchIt with regard to somebody watching the show or a new client. So there's a number of people in the technology business. There's a number of people coming up with great ideas. There's a number of people that are perhaps watching this show and saying to themselves, I've got a great idea for truckers. I'm going to go build a technology that's going to do A, B, C, and D. So when these technology companies reach out to you, is there a process or an onboarding that you take them through? What does it look like when a technology company in transportation, more specifically trucking, reaches out to Susan Fall, the queen of technology PR for trucking, and they say, hey, I want LaunchIt to represent me? What's the process to get them on board? What type of questions do you ask to make sure that you can help them and that they're the type of company that you want to represent?
So it depends upon what stage they come in. And again, we've recently had this earlier stage where we're helping more in that advisory consulting role. So that's a different process. But product's done. They have, it's been through beta. Now they're ready to launch it. One thing that I'm very particular about, and the industry has come to respect, especially the reporters, is just as they vet me, I vet them quite extensively. Make sure that they have the financial backing to sustain that first good 18 months, because those are difficult months. That first year and a half of any new product is difficult. So make sure that they have that, because we're going on my word, as well as kind of the LaunchIt family. So I have a variety of technologies. None of them can be competes. So I only have one trailer tracking device. Couldn't have two, because in my world, my trailer tracking device that we represent is the best, and they are the best experts. So I have to make sure that they can uphold that reputation. I make sure they have someone who will be the voice. It's interesting. I can look at a product and love the product, but the people behind it might not be the right people, or vice versa. Great people, product slightly off. You need that right combo of the right people with the right product, the right company culture. So there's a lot of things that come into play, and that's all vetted in that early process of just while they're interviewing me and making sure LaunchIt is the right team for them, I'm doing likewise. And so once it is decided, then yes, we have a whole process that we go through, a kickoff meeting, and we do a very interesting exercise. A lot of times we find out that internally their messaging is off. So we make sure we fix that first. Like you can ask a CEO and you can ask the VP of sales, describe your company for me, and you'd be fascinated at the number of times that message is not in sync. So that's usually our first. We make sure that's all jiving, and then we'll roll it out from there.
See, that makes all the sense in the world. That's fantastic. So when somebody hires LaunchIt, what they're really hiring is not only everything behind it, but they get Susan's expertise with many, many years in the industry. And not only is LaunchIt Public Relations doing the important work of public relations for these technology companies, but Susan now is also stepping in as an advisory role. So let's just talk about that just briefly. Does that mean that people might have an idea for a technology, or they're trying to figure out what to do with their technology, or they're trying to figure out maybe how to integrate their technology, or what moving part of their technology can be incorporated into the transportation field, and they want to get into this field, and they want to reach out to somebody that's an expert in the field, so therefore they call you, Susan, and then you give them the consultation and the advice they need? Is that what we're talking about with your advisory role?
It is, and I'll tell you an interesting story, because my advisory role recently turned into a co-founding role, because I was intrigued enough, because it was still just such an idea. He actually used to be a reporter in our industry, left the industry for a while, so I've known him for years. And in June, in the midst of all this, came to me for advice. And we decided to co-found a company that is called 10-5. It's a driver app. We'll be launching it for prime time very soon here. But that's an example of, and certainly becoming a co-founder, I can only do that so often. Oftentimes, again, it is depending. Sometimes I do some equity share, depending upon what stage they're at, where they're at. And again, it really comes in. And sometimes it is a one-time pop. Sometimes it's we retain you, and we have a weekly meeting. We have a weekly progress of where the product's at and where it needs to change. And I'm a big fan of a roadmap, and a lot of times engineers are also big fans of roadmaps, but they forget about the other roadmap, which is the marketing side and the launching side and the need. Is that really needed? It may sound cool, but is it really needed? And that's where understanding whatever industry you're in and understanding it extensively. I mean, I spend the first hour of my day just reading newsletters, reading daily newsletters, what's going on in the news, what's happening, but only in my industry. I mean, I don't know. It's
very interesting. And, when you use the word roadmap, that's kind of funny in your industry, because you're all about the roadmap. You have to have a roadmap. Sometimes the roadmap needs to change. It's just like trucking. When you're going down the road and maybe their app is saying they need to make a detour because there's a bump in the road or an accident or a pile up or a backup. So it's the same thing as an entrepreneur. It's the same thing at LaunchIt PR. You put a good roadmap in place that's going to get you from A to B in the fastest, most efficient and seamless way. With regard to 10-5, this application that's coming out, I'm going to have you back on the show again so we can talk about that. Of course, 10-5, I remember 10-5 growing up from the song that was out about the trucker, the famous song.
Well, you would probably know 10-4.
10-4, right? Okay, 10-4, tell me about 10-5. 10-5 is one more than 10-4.
So 10-4, and again, it's fun trying to think of a name for a company. Typically, I'm past that stage when I come in with the PR side. We've certainly helped name products before, but the company name. So this was a fun exercise, and 10-4 was a little too kitschy, and so I said to Drew, my partner, I said, "How about 10-5? It's kind of like a next gen of 10-4." And then we looked up what that actually really meant. And 10-5 really means relay my message, which the app of 10-5 is about driver communication. It is about improving the communication between the driver and his dispatcher. So we're using interactive voice technology. It is a very, it's a very advanced way, a new way, think Siri, but think just trucking. And so 10-5 is our take on that. And it's been fun. It's been a very fun fun ride. And well, I don't know, hopefully maybe I'll be on a year from now talking about the success of 10.5. Who knows?
Well, I love it. I love it. So yeah, 10.5 is the next gen of 10.4. And with regard to this interview, now that I know what 10.5 means, we're going to 10.5 the interview all around for you and get this into the right hands, because people that are in the technology business and in the technology industry, especially those focusing in on transportation and more specifically trucking, there's such a giant amount of a possibility for the future with regard to what technology can do to the transportation industry, and the person that can get you from point A to B to where you want to go is Susan Fall with LaunchIt PR. And Susan, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. I heard that you were sort of the queen of PR in the trucking industry, and I'm very excited that we had you on the show. I had some questions, and we actually expounded on many of the things I was wondering, and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. As I said, I always love talking trucking. I'll do it any day.